I knew something was wrong the moment I opened the attic door and felt the emptiness before I even saw it. The space where my box had been, my box with 45 years of letters, was bare, a pale square of untouched wood surrounded by dust. For a second, I thought I was simply forgetting again, misplacing things the way women my age sometimes do. But no. I remembered exactly where I'd left it, and I also remembered the sound I'd heard yesterday evening, faint steps on the attic stairs that weren't mine. I don't panic easily anymore. 70 years teaches a woman to breathe through almost anything, so I stood still, hands on the railing, letting the truth reach me slowly, the way cold water does when you wade in too far. My letters were gone. All of them. The ones from my mother, written in her delicate script the year she died. The ones from my sister when she moved to Montana. The postcards from my children when they were young and still thought I was magic. And the ones from my husband. The ones that kept him alive for me long after I buried him. I went downstairs quietly, almost carefully, as if any sudden movement could undo me further. The house smelled of lemon cleaner, too strong. Not my scent. Not my hands. And then I saw her through the kitchen doorway. Claire. Standing by the sink. Humming. Wiping down the counter with the bright, brisk cheerfulness she only uses when she knows she's crossed a line, but plans to pretend she hasn't. "Morning, Margaret," she said without turning. "I tidied some things up yesterday. That attic was impossible to walk through." My throat tightened. "What exactly did you tidy?" "Oh, just old papers, boxes, clutter. Honestly, you should have tossed half of that years ago." She finally turned to look at me, smiling the kind of smile that means nothing good. "Don't worry, it's all handled." Handled. Such a small, sharp word. I felt my voice drop into a place so quiet it almost frightened me. "Claire, what did you throw away?" She shrugged lightly, as if discussing recycling. "A bunch of old letters. They were yellow and brittle and taking up space. Daniel said they were sentimental, but really, Margaret, that kind of hoarding isn't healthy at your age. You should travel lighter." I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was in the chair by the window, my hands in my lap, cold despite the morning sun. I heard Claire moving around me, plates, drawers, her careless rhythm, but it sounded distant, like she was in another life, not mine. I didn't shout at her. I didn't accuse. That's never been my way. Silence can reveal more truth than confrontation ever will. And in that silence, I understood something I'd been avoiding for months. Claire didn't simply dislike my letters. She disliked what they meant. Roots. History. The kind of permanence that makes selling a house difficult. She knew about the box. She knew there was one letter inside I guarded more than the rest. She'd asked about it once, too casually to be casual. And now, the box was gone. I stood again, slower this time, feeling older than I had yesterday. "Where did you put the things you threw out?" "Oh, the trash truck came this morning," she said, still breezy. "Everything's long gone by now." Long gone. I walked back to the attic later, alone. The empty square on the floor looked like an accusation. But beneath the grief, beneath the shock, there was something steadier rising in me. A quiet, unfamiliar strength. I had lost more than letters today. I had lost the one document my husband had entrusted to me. The one proof that this house, our home, was mine alone. And Claire had known exactly what she was doing. I closed the attic door with a soft click. my hand steady despite everything. Age may weaken the body, but sometimes it hardens the spine. Tomorrow, I would begin finding out just how much of my life they thought they could erase. I spent the rest of the morning moving through my own house like a guest who had arrived without warning. I touched the back of the living room chair, the frame of the hallway mirror, the edge of the kitchen counter, as if each object might steady me or tell me what to do next. Nothing did. Everything felt slightly altered, as though the house itself knew something had been taken from it. Daniel called around noon. He rarely calls at that hour. He's usually racing between meetings. So I answered quickly, hoping for something warm. A small reassurance. A piece of the sun I raised. "Mom," he said, breathless, distracted. "Claire told me you two talked this morning." I felt my shoulders tense. "She threw away my letters, Daniel." There was a pause, but not the kind I wanted, the thoughtful kind, the loving kind. His was the pause of a man calculating the easiest response. "I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it," he finally said. "You know how she gets when she organizes. She's thorough." Thorough. That was one word for it. "They weren't clutter," I said quietly. "They were my life." And one of them, was important. "Important how?" he asked, the impatience leaking in before he could hide it. "Mom, I really don't have time for a long explanation right now." "You never do," I said, before I could stop myself. My voice wasn't angry, just tired, worn the way old paper wears. He sighed sharply. "Look, we were actually going to talk to you about the house. Claire thinks, well, we both think, you might be happier somewhere easier to manage. A condo, maybe. No stairs, no yard. You'd have people around. It's safer." Safer. Another useful word. "And you'd sell this house?" I asked. He hesitated again. I could almost hear Claire in the background of his mind, whispering arguments, shaping his tone. "It's just a thought," he said. "The market is strong, and you've said yourself the place is getting hard for you." I never said that. I said the gutters needed cleaning, and the garden needed better soil. But to some people, anything a 70-year-old says becomes a weakness they can use. "Daniel," I whispered, "this house is all I have left of your father." "Oh, Mom," he said lightly, almost dismissively. "Don't get dramatic." It wasn't drama. If anything, it was the first truth I'd said aloud all day. "I have to go," he added. "We'll talk this weekend. Love you." The call ended before I managed to form a reply. I set the phone on the table and sat down slowly. My knees aren't what they were at 50, but it wasn't the joints that made me move like that. It was the heaviness that comes when understanding finally lands. The understanding that your child is no longer on your side, not truly. I spent the afternoon in the garden pulling dry branches off the hydrangeas. The cold air helped me think. The garden has always been the place where I sort myself out. Plants don't lie. They don't pretend. They show you exactly what they are, even when they struggle. While I worked, I kept asking myself why Claire would throw out the letters now, why Daniel would choose this week to mention selling the house, why everything felt suddenly orchestrated, as though they'd been waiting for the right moment to corner me. The answer was simple enough. I live alone. I am 70. And they think that makes me soft. When the sun began to lower, I stood and brushed soil off my gloves. My back ached, just a little, the familiar kind of ache. But beneath it, there was a new feeling, something steady forming inside me, like a slow knot tightening. I went back inside and opened the drawer where I keep my documents. Not the letters, those were gone, but the rest. Utility statements, pension files, old insurance envelopes. I sifted through everything, searching for anything that might help me rebuild what Claire had destroyed. There was nothing yet, but there would be. Grief held me through the morning. By evening, grief had thinned, and something else had taken its place. Resolve. The quiet kind. The dangerous kind. Tomorrow, I would start looking for help. Someone who remembered my husband's arrangements better than I did. Someone who knew what that missing letter contained. I might be 70, but I was not done. And I would not be moved out of my own life by a woman who never bothered to learn it. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of worry, though there was plenty of that, but because my mind kept circling the same thought, soft and persistent as a thumb brushing over old paper. He trusted me to keep that letter safe. My husband, my John, a man who never raised his voice, who never hurried his words, who believed that carefulness was a kind of love. I sat at the kitchen table in the early morning light, the quiet kind of light that arrives before the world remembers it has obligations. I made tea, though I barely drank it, and let my fingers trace the steam as if it could tell me something. At 70, I've learned that answers rarely come when you demand them. They come when you sit still enough to hear your own memory. So I let myself remember. Not a flashback, not a scene retold like a storybook, but the feeling of that day when John brought the letter home, the weight of his seriousness, the way he placed the envelope in my hands as though it were something fragile and alive. "It's not that I don't trust Daniel," he'd said. "It's that I trust the world even less." He worried about influence, about people with stronger wills than our sons. He said it gently, almost apologetically. John had known, long before I did, that affection doesn't protect a parent from being pushed aside. The attic felt colder this morning, the emptiness harsher. I opened the door again and stood there, looking at the same square of clean floor where the box had rested. You wouldn't think a bit of bare wood could hurt a person, but it did. Because grief changes its shape as you age, becomes sharper, not duller. And losing those letters was like losing John for the second time. I closed the attic and went downstairs, moving slowly so my steps wouldn't echo. The house didn't feel like mine, not fully. It felt monitored, assessed, measured. Like Claire was somewhere in the walls, judging what stayed and what didn't. Around 10, I drove into town. My hands trembled only once when I turned the key, but I ignored it. I have never been a woman to let trembling stop me. The road to Pinewood Avenue seemed shorter than usual, maybe because I knew exactly where I was going, and there's comfort in purpose when your life is slipping from under you. The bank was quiet, a few people in line, soft murmurs, the clicking of a printer. Ordinary sounds of an ordinary place. I waited until the young teller finished with another customer, and then stepped forward, careful, polite. "I'm looking for archival documents," I said. "Something from many years ago, connected to my late husband." Her smile was kind but firm, the way young people smile when they're about to disappoint you. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but archived legal documents can only be released to attorneys or by court request, unless you have the original paperwork." "I don't," I said. "It was thrown away." The teller's expression softened, but not enough to change the rules. Rules rarely bend for women my age. She offered me a brochure about financial services, which I didn't take. It wasn't her fault. She was doing her job. But her words echoed inside me the entire walk back to my car. Only attorneys. Only attorneys. John's attorney. If he was still alive, if he still remembered us, if his records still existed. I sat in the car with my hands on the steering wheel and felt the first stirring of something that had been dormant too long: determination. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't rage. The kind that moves like water, carving its way through stone not by force, but by persistence. When I got home, the house was empty. Claire must have gone out. Good. I didn't want her watching me, sniffing around my movements. I went straight to my old address book, the one with soft pages and ink blots and names crossed out only when the people beneath them had died. And there it was. Faded, but legible. Mr. Harold Whitcomb, attorney. Written in John's careful script. I traced the name with my fingertip, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. It had been more than a decade since John passed, more than a decade since I'd spoken to Harold. But if anyone could help me, it would be the man who drafted the letter in the first place. My heart shook a little, not out of fear, but because age makes you aware of every risk, every exertion, everything that could be taken before you have the strength to reclaim it. But I still picked up the phone, and as it rang, I realized something. They may have thrown away my letters, but they hadn't thrown away my will. Not yet. Harold answered on the third ring. His voice was thinner than I remembered, softened by age, but still carrying that steady, thoughtful cadence that once made people feel protected just by entering his office. "Mrs. Holloway?" he said, after a pause long enough for recognition to form. "Well, my goodness. It's been years. Are you all right?" People only ask that question one of two ways. His was the gentle kind. The kind meant for someone who sounds as if life has pressed too hard on her chest. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the familiarity settle me. "I'm managing," I told him, "but I need your help." There was no confusion in his silence. He had always been quicker than most. "This is about John, I assume." "Yes," I whispered. "And the house." A faint rustle came through the line, papers shifting or perhaps his hand brushing against the receiver. "I remember some of it," he said. "But I'm an old man now, Margaret. My memories have frayed like the cuffs on my shirts. Still, come by. We'll see what can be recovered." We set a time for tomorrow. He gave me the address of the assisted living home where he now lived, and I wrote it down slowly, the way my hands insist on writing at this age. Careful, deliberate, no wasted movement. After we hung up, I stayed seated with the phone in my hand. It's a strange thing to feel hope and grief growing together, one pushing against the other until you don't know which feeling is the root and which is the bloom. By late afternoon, Claire was home again. I heard her heels first, the confident clack of a woman who believes the world is hers as long as she keeps her chin lifted. She came into the kitchen, humming something tuneless, pulled a sparkling water from the fridge, and looked at me like I was part of the furniture she didn't particularly like. "Oh, good. You're up," she said. "I've been thinking. If we start showing the house, we'll have to declutter more. Buyers like clean spaces, you know." I folded the dish towel very slowly, as if it were fragile. "This house is not going to be shown." She laughed, a soft, false sound. "Margaret, we're trying to help you. A 2-story house at your age? It's not safe. Stairs, yard work, maintenance, it's all too much." Her words floated around me like perfume made of something mildly toxic. "I've managed it," I said. "Yes, but for how much longer?" Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice as if imparting wisdom. "I don't want to say this, but you've been forgetful lately. Throwing away old papers was a blessing in disguise. You don't need things that confuse you." I looked at her then, really looked. For months, I'd been giving her the benefit of age-softened doubt. Maybe she was awkward. Maybe she didn't mean to be cutting. Maybe her coldness was simply the result of two women never finding the right rhythm with each other. But standing there, sunlight catching the hard edge of her mouth, I saw the truth with a clarity that startled me. She didn't want to help me. She wanted to manage me. And Daniel, my sweet boy who once brought me dandelions in a chipped cup, he was drifting in her wake without even noticing he'd lost the shore. "I will not be leaving my home," I said quietly. "And I will not be spoken to like a child." For a moment, Claire's expression flickered. Just a moment. Then the mask settled again, smooth and unbothered. "Daniel and I will talk to you this weekend," she said. Her tone clipped. "Together. We'll sort this out." I nodded once, though not in agreement. More in acknowledgement of the storm she thought she was preparing to sail through. She didn't understand yet that the weather was no longer hers to read. After she left the room, I leaned on the counter, not because I was tired, but because the truth of everything pressed against me at once. The loss, the betrayal, the strange blooming of my own resolve, it all sat heavily in my chest. I looked toward the drawer where my documents lay scattered from last night's search. Things I'd kept neatly for years, suddenly precious in ways I hadn't foreseen. The letter was gone, yes, but the truth behind it was not. And tomorrow, I would walk into a quiet living facility where a nearly forgotten man still carried a piece of my past, a piece of John, a piece of my defense. At 70, a woman may lose her agility, her stamina, even her patience. But she does not lose her right to fight for her own life. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. My joints weren't stiff yet, and for a moment I pretended that meant the day would be gentle with me. But gentleness wasn't what I needed anymore. What I needed was clarity and proof, and someone who remembered my husband not as a footnote, but as a man who made careful choices. I dressed slowly. A soft gray sweater, comfortable trousers, the coat John once said made me look capable. Funny what stays with you. At 70, memories cling harder than fabric. The assisted living home sat at the edge of town, surrounded by tall fir trees that looked like guardians from another century. The lobby was warm, smelling faintly of cinnamon and disinfectant. A young receptionist led me down a quiet hallway, our steps muffled by thick carpeting. "Mr. Whitcomb is expecting you," she whispered, as if anything louder might disturb the air. Harold sat near a window, a blanket over his knees, his white hair thinner now, but still brushed neatly. When he saw me, his face stirred with recognition, not immediate, but warm, like a photograph slowly coming into focus. "Margaret," he said, "you haven't changed." We both knew that wasn't true, but kindness is also a kind of truth. I sat across from him, folding my hands to keep them steady. He noticed. He had always noticed more than people said aloud. "You sound troubled," he said. "Tell me what's happened." So I did. Not every detail, not every bruise to the heart, just enough for him to understand the gravity. When I told him the letters were gone, something in his expression tightened. "Ah," he murmured. John feared something like this. Not specifically, but generally. Influence can be a quiet thing, Margaret, like water finding cracks. I swallowed hard. Do you still have any of his records? He leaned back slightly, his fingers tapping on the arm of his chair. I remembered that gesture from decades ago, his thinking gesture. The room felt still around us, like we were the only two people left carrying a piece of John's voice. I believe, he said slowly, that I kept a duplicate of the letter you're referring to. I wasn't obligated to, but John asked me to hold on to one. Just in case, he said. My throat tightened. Can it be retrieved? It can, he said, but it may take time. The firm moved buildings after I retired, and some of the old client files were boxed away. I'll need someone to search through the archives. Hope is a fragile thing at 70. Too many decades teach you how easily it can shatter. But I felt something rise in me anyway, soft and trembling. The sense that I wasn't entirely alone in this. Thank you, I whispered. He waved a frail hand. Don't thank me yet. We must find it. And if we do, well, Margaret, you'll have every right to stand your ground. He paused, studying my face. Does your son understand what that house means to you? For a moment, I couldn't speak. I looked at the trees outside the window instead. Tall, old, stubborn enough to still be standing. I don't think he sees me clearly anymore, I finally said. He listens to her more than he listens to himself. Harold nodded, not unkindly. It happens. Marriage changes loyalties, but it shouldn't erase them. We talked a little longer. About John, about the early years of the house, about the careful legal structure my husband set up without ever burdening me with the details. He'd always said he wanted to make life easier for me, not harder. When I rose to leave, Harold reached for my hand. His skin was thin and cool, but his grip still had purpose. You are not a woman who can be pushed out of her own home, he said quietly. Don't let them make you forget that. I walked back to my car with his words echoing through me. Outside, the air was crisp, the kind that wakes your lungs whether you want it to or not. I felt taller than I had yesterday. Not younger, never that, but steadier. When I returned home, Claire was in the living room, talking on the phone. She lowered her voice as soon as she saw me, as if I were a child wandering into an adult's conversation. We'll discuss it this weekend, she said. She's being difficult, that's all. She hung up and gave me that tight smile she uses like a piece of armor. Everything all right with your little errand? My errand, I said softly, concerns this house. She blinked. Just once, a tiny fracture in her confident facade. But I saw it. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of her. I didn't feel smaller. I didn't feel like a burden in my own home. I felt like someone who had just begun to reclaim something that had been stolen. Tomorrow, I thought, would be another step. And I was no longer walking quietly for their sake. The next day felt heavier than the last, though the sky was clear and bright in that early spring way that makes everything look slightly sharper than it should. I moved through the house slowly, not out of frailty, but thoughtfulness. At 70, you learn the value of measured steps, physical and otherwise. I expected a call from Harold's old firm, but none came. I told myself archives take time, and time is something I've learned to wait inside of, even when it hurts. Still, each hour felt stretched thin, like an old bedsheet that's been washed too many times. By mid-afternoon, I gathered the courage to search the attic again. Not for the letters. I wasn't delusional. But sometimes, when something is taken from you, Your hands need proof of the emptiness before your heart can accept it. The stairs creaked under me as I climbed. Claire always complained about that. Said the noise was a sign the house was too old. I used to laugh it off. Today, I didn't laugh. The attic greeted me with silence, as if even the dust knew to tread softly. I stood where the box had sat, touching the outline its absence had left behind. That little square of clean wood looked almost obscene, indecent, like a wound that had been scrubbed too neatly. John's handwriting, my mother's lilting loops, my own young hopes pressed into envelopes. Gone. My knees bent before I realized I was kneeling. I rested my hand on the floor, not a dramatic gesture, just the posture of a woman acknowledging the truth she never wanted to face. Claire had thrown away part of my life, but that wasn't all she was trying to throw away. I exhaled slowly, gathered myself, and went back downstairs. Claire came home an hour later, loud and cheerful, humming again, a nervous habit disguised as confidence. She was carrying a reusable grocery bag filled with items she liked: sparkling water, a particular kind of almond crackers, a bouquet of white lilies she always bought for herself, under the pretense of brightening the house. She put the flowers in a vase, then smiled at me over her shoulder. I thought these would liven things up here. They're lovely, I said. It was true. But loveliness offered without kindness is only decoration. Claire briefly hesitated, then said, Daniel and I talked last night. We think it's time to make some real decisions about your living situation. I contained my breath, not holding it, just containing it, the way you might hold a fragile object you don't trust not to break. Oh, I said. Yes. She clasped her hands, adopting the posture of someone dispensing guidance. Look, Margaret, it's obvious that keeping up with this house is becoming too much. The stairs alone. I've managed them for decades, I said. She smiled with the patience of someone speaking to a child. And decades take their toll. We want you somewhere safer, more practical. Practical, that word again. It made my skin tighten. And selling the house would help with that, she added, her tone overly casual, as if slipping in a preference she thought I might not notice. There is no need to sell the house, I said. Her eyes, blue, cold, flickered just slightly. It's not only about need, Margaret. It's about what makes the most sense. You're alone here. This place is far too big. It wasn't too big when Daniel grew up in it, I said. Well, she replied brightly, people change. I looked at her for a long time, the kind of look a woman gives when she finally stops pretending she doesn't see the thing that's been right in front of her. You're planning something, I said quietly, and you thought getting rid of my letters would make it easier. She froze. For just a second, but it was enough. Her face went smooth again, but the truth had already leaked out around the edges. That's absurd, she scoffed. They were junk. No, I said softly. They were evidence. Her brows drew together, not in confusion, but calculation. She was piecing together which evidence I meant, and what it protected, and why she might want it gone. Before she could speak, the phone rang. I moved to answer it, though Claire reached for it too quickly, as if she wanted control over the conversation before it began. But I got there first. Mrs. Holloway? A young, polite voice. This is Amelia from Whitcomb and Gray. Mr. Whitcomb asked us to call you. We've located the storage catalog for his retired cases. We believe we've found the box containing your husband's documents. We'll need a bit more time, but we're close. My knees nearly softened, but I stayed standing. Thank you, I said. Claire stood still behind me, listening. I knew she was, and I knew she heard every word. When I hung up, the house felt different. Not safer, not calmer, but balanced, as if the ground under me had shifted in my favor by an inch. Just an inch. But sometimes that's all a woman needs to stop being pushed backward. Claire's voice was a little too bright when she spoke again. So, you're digging into old paperwork now? I'm retrieving what's mine, I said. And for the first time, I watched her step back. Not physically, but in the way a person does when they realize the wall they were trying to corner you into has suddenly vanished. Tomorrow, I thought, would bring answers. And after that, consequences. I woke to the muted sound of voices downstairs. Claire's sharp whisper and Daniel's tired murmur blending into the kind of conversation people have when they don't want the person in the house to hear them. It's strange, isn't it? How the walls of a home grow thinner as you age, as if the house itself has decided you've earned the right to know what's being plotted against you. I lay still for a minute, listening. She's being unreasonable, Daniel, Claire hissed. She's stressed, he replied, but without conviction. We'll talk to her. We have to talk to her. The realtor wants to schedule the walkthrough. We can't keep stalling. I closed my eyes, not in surrender, but in recognition. They weren't discussing possibilities anymore. They were discussing plans. I rose slowly, letting my joints negotiate their usual morning debate. At 70, you don't spring from bed. You negotiate your way out of it. But my steps were steady as I went downstairs. They both fell silent when I entered the kitchen. Claire recovered first. Morning, Margaret. We were just talking about the house. Daniel shot her a warning glance, but it was too late. The realtor wants to come by next week, she continued, if that works for you. I poured myself tea before answering. The sound of the kettle, the click of the cup on the saucer, small, steady domestic noises, calmed me more than their words disturbed me. No, I said. Daniel blinked. No. The timing doesn't work? We can reschedule. No, I repeated. The house will not be shown. Claire let out a breathy, incredulous laugh. Margaret, you're not listening. You can't stay here alone. This place is too much for you. It's not safe. It's not practical. You keep using that word, I said quietly. Practical for whom? Her jaw tightened. Daniel looked down at his hands like a schoolboy caught between guilt and obedience. We're trying to help you, he said. You know that. I know you believe that, I replied. But believing a thing doesn't make it true. Claire stepped toward me, crossing her arms, her favorite stance when cornering someone weaker. I'm going to be very honest, Margaret, she said, her voice low and falsely compassionate. You're becoming forgetful. You're overwhelmed. You don't need a house this size. You need... A keeper? I asked. Her lips parted, then snapped shut. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Mom, please don't start. I'm not starting anything, I said. I'm simply not agreeing to something that isn't in my interest. Claire's mask slipped, only a fraction, only for a heartbeat. But I saw it. The irritation, the calculation, the knowledge that her path was no longer as smooth as she'd expected. She glanced at Daniel. We should go, she muttered. We'll talk tonight. After they left, the quiet felt heavy. Not peaceful, but loaded, like a room waiting for the next move in a game I never agreed to play. I walked through the house, letting my fingers brush the walls, the furniture, the worn wood of the banister. This place held more of me than they ever would. By afternoon, My thoughts had settled into something hard and clear. I found the small metal box in my closet, the one where John kept the insurance policy, the first receipts for the house, the typed note he left for me the year he got sick. Nothing legal enough to replace the lost letter, but enough to remind me that he had never doubted which one of us would need protection. The phone rang. I expected it to be Daniel, ready for another push. But it wasn't. It was Harold's law firm. "Mrs. Holloway," the young woman said, her voice tinged with the excitement of small but important victories. "We've located Mr. Whitcomb's archival box. It's intact. We'll need a bit more time to examine the contents, but the file you described appears to be included." I felt my breath catch, not sharply, but deeply, like air finding a place it hadn't reached in years. "Thank you," I said. I could barely push the words through. After the call ended, I sat down on the edge of the sofa, letting the weight of relief settle into my bones. It wasn't the end, not yet, but it was the first real step toward reclaiming what Claire thought she had erased. Evening came. The front door opened. Daniel returned alone. He looked exhausted, eyes shadowed, shoulders slumped. My son. My boy. A man pulled in too many directions, with a spine that bent too easily under a voice stronger than his. "Mom," he began, sinking into a chair. "We need to talk." I sat opposite him, not across a battlefield, just across a table. But the distance felt larger than that. He rubbed his forehead. "Claire thinks, well, we think, you're not coping well. You forget things. You misplace things." "That box wasn't misplaced," I said. He hesitated. "I know you think she shouldn't have thrown those papers out, but she didn't do it maliciously. You're blowing it out of proportion." I studied him, really studied him, and for the first time, I realized he didn't understand the situation at all. He wasn't being cruel. He was being blind. "Daniel," I said gently, "you've forgotten who I am." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that I am not a woman you can shepherd into a corner. I am not fragile, and I am not leaving my home." He stared at me as though seeing a new person entirely, someone he hadn't accounted for. The conversation ended quietly. He stood, hugged me stiffly, and left. After the door shut, I whispered to myself, to the empty house, to the memory of the man who once stood beside me. I am still here. And tomorrow they would begin to understand what that meant. Lily arrived just after lunch, her knock soft, almost apologetic, as if she sensed the heaviness in the air before stepping inside. She's 21, studying sociology, always observing the world with that quiet, earnest curiosity I recognize from my own youth, back when I believed understanding people meant you could protect yourself from them. I know better now, but I still admire the way she tries. "Grandma?" she called. "It's just me." "Come in, sweetheart," I said, relieved to hear a voice that didn't bristle with plans for my future. She stepped into the kitchen, cheeks pink from the cold, a strand of dark hair escaping her braid. Her eyes scanned my face the way only someone who loves you can, gently, but truthfully. "You look tired," she said. "I've had a busy week." I tried to smile. "Sit. I'll make tea." She didn't argue, just shrugged off her coat and settled at the table. Some people fill a room with noise. Lily fills it with steadiness. I set the kettle on the stove, the familiar whistle eventually rising like a cue for both of us to breathe. When I sat across from her with 2 mugs, she didn't wait long. "Dad called me," she said. "He and Claire, they're talking about selling the house." I stirred my tea slowly. "Yes, They're talking. Do you want that? No, I said, and the firmness of my voice surprised even me. Lily looked down at her mug for a moment, then back at me. Grandma, what's really going on? It was the way she asked, not with suspicion, not with frustration, but with a tenderness that invited honesty. And suddenly, I felt the exhaustion of carrying the truth alone. Claire threw away my letters, I said. She frowned. Your old letters? The ones you kept in the attic? I nodded. But why would she? Then she stopped, eyes widening. She understood faster than her father ever had. Grandma, those were important to you. They were more than that, I said softly. One of them was a legal document your grandfather gave me. It proved the house was mine alone. Lily went very still. She threw that away? She knows she did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the kitchen, steady and indifferent. Finally, Lily's voice broke the silence, quiet but fierce. They can't just push you out. You've lived here your whole life. I reached out and covered her hand. People do many things they know they shouldn't, especially when someone else whispers that it's practical. She swallowed hard. Did Dad know about the letter? No, I said. But he didn't ask either. Her lip trembled. Not for herself, but for me. What are you going to do? Harold Whitcomb might have a copy of the document, I said. His firm is searching the archives. Lily's shoulders lifted with hope. And if they find it, you'll be protected. Yes, I replied. But I'm also realizing something else. She leaned toward me, waiting. I'm realizing that I've spent too long trying not to be a burden, I said. And some people mistake care for weakness. Lily squeezed my hand. You're not weak. No, I said, but I've been quiet. Too quiet. Her eyes softened with pride, the kind a granddaughter has when she sees her grandmother stand a little taller than before. Whatever happens, Lily said, I'm on your side. It was such a simple sentence, but it felt like the first warm thing that had touched me in days. I exhaled slowly, letting that warmth settle in my chest. Thank you, I whispered. That might matter more than anything else. We sat together until the sun shifted across the kitchen floor, stretching shadows between us like threads connecting one generation to the next. And for the first time since the attic door revealed its emptiness, I felt something close to steady ground beneath me. Not safety, not victory, but support. Support is its own kind of strength. Lily returned the next morning with her hair still damp from a rushed shower, a notebook tucked under her arm, and that determined look she gets when she's made up her mind to fix something, whether the world wants fixing or not. She kissed my cheek, warm and hurried, then walked straight toward the hallway closet. Where are you going? I asked. To start looking, she said. For anything your grandfather might have kept. Receipts, notes, insurance files. People don't leave their lives in only one place. I followed her, slower but steadier. The closet was cramped, filled with winter coats, an old vacuum, a box of tangled Christmas lights. Nothing seemed promising, but Lily wasn't deterred. She knelt on the floor and began pulling out items one by one, building little islands of memory around her. Stacked papers here, envelopes there, a shoebox filled with picture frames wrapped in towels. I used to play hide and seek in here, she said, half smiling. You'd pretend you didn't see me even when my shoes were sticking out. You were easy to pretend for, I said. You always giggled. She laughed, the sound of it softening the edges of the morning. We worked together, her hands quick and youthful, mine slower, but exact. I've never been careless with my things. The irony is that Claire used that very trait against me. To someone like her, order is an invitation, an easy place to strike. We found a binder with old utility bills, neatly arranged, then a folder with insurance summaries from 30 years ago. Lily spread them on the carpet like oversized playing cards. "None of this is what we need," she murmured, frowning. "No," I said, "but it reminds me that John kept records everywhere. He didn't trust memory alone. He trusted you," she said quietly. I closed my eyes for a moment. That truth, spoken aloud, landed deep. After nearly an hour, Lily dragged out a low plastic bin I hadn't opened in at least a decade. She popped the lid and began rummaging until her hand brushed something thin and papery. "Grandma, what's this?" I knelt beside her, carefully, with the reluctant grace of 70-year-old knees, and saw a yellowed envelope tucked between old tax statements. Not the letter. I felt that immediately. But something familiar in the weight of it. I opened it gently, the way you open something you're afraid has become too fragile to survive your touch. Inside were notes written in John's hand, brief, clipped lines he'd drafted for Harold, outlining his wishes for the property should anything happen to him. They weren't legally binding on their own, but they pointed directly to the intentions behind the missing letter. Lily leaned in. "Does this help?" "It helps remind me that John meant what he said," I replied, "and that Claire doesn't understand what she's tampering with." Lily hesitated, then asked, "Do you think she did it on purpose? Throwing away the letters?" I didn't answer immediately. I folded the notes carefully, pressing them flat with my palm. "Yes," I said at last. "I think she knew the letter mattered. Maybe not exactly what it meant, but enough to want it gone." Lily's face darkened. Not with anger, but with disappointment so deep it almost looked like grief. Dad should have stopped her. "Your father," I said softly, "is trying to keep peace in a marriage that demands pieces of him he doesn't realize he's giving away." We sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by scattered papers, remnants of lives lived quietly without the expectation that someone would someday try to erase them. Lily took a breath. "Grandma, whatever happens, you're not doing this alone." I felt something warm spread through my ribs, like a small light filling the hollowed-out places the last few days had carved in me. Strength can come from within, yes. But there's another strength, quieter and sometimes more powerful. The strength of being witnessed. "Thank you," I said. "That may be what saves me." We gathered the papers carefully, sorted them into small piles, and tucked the significant ones into a new folder. Lily labeled in her neat handwriting. "House documents. Important." It wasn't the letter. It wasn't the victory. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, I've learned, often look like small things. Like a girl kneeling on a carpet, building the foundation for a fight her grandmother never wanted, but can no longer avoid. Daniel arrived in the early evening, the hour when the house fills with shadows and every sound seems sharper. He didn't knock. He rarely does anymore. Just let himself in and called out, "Mom? Can we talk?" I knew from his tone that this conversation wasn't his idea. Claire's fingerprints were all over it. "I'm in the dining room," I said. He appeared in the doorway, hands shoved into his coat pockets, looking like a man uneasy in his own skin. That was new. Or maybe I had simply failed to see it before. He sat across from me, tapping his foot lightly against the floor, an old habit from childhood. I used to place my hand on his knee to steady him. Today, I let the tapping continue. "Mom," he began, "Claire and I are worried about you." I folded my hands. "Is that so?" "Yes," he said quickly, relieved to skip to the part he'd rehearsed. "You've been distant and forgetful. And honestly, this house is overwhelming. It's time to start making decisions that are good for your future." "My future?" I repeated softly. "Where is Claire this evening?" "She thought it best if I talked to you alone," he said. Of course she did. Claire knows I'm less likely to bite when Daniel's the one holding the leash. He sighed and pulled a document from his coat. A crisp envelope, official looking, the kind printed at a business center that charges by the hour. "I brought something," he said. "It's nothing drastic. Just a power of attorney form. Temporary. It would let us help you with the financial decisions and the sale." "No," I said. He blinked. "At least read it." "No. Mom, please." His voice tightened. "We're trying to help you. You're making this harder than it needs to be." I looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the man, but the boy beneath the man. The boy who once clung to my hand crossing streets, who used to ask me if thunder could break the sky. I felt love, deep and steady, and I felt something else beside it. The sudden certainty that love does not excuse surrender. "Daniel," I said, "do you remember what your father used to tell you about decisions?" He frowned. "I don't know." He said, "A rushed decision is usually someone else's." He looked down at the envelope. His jaw tightened. "Claire didn't rush anything," he muttered. "She's practical." "There's that word again," I said. "Practical." "Because that's what this is," he snapped. "You're 70. You can't maintain this place forever. You're overwhelmed and emotional and—" "No," I said quietly. "I am grieving. That is not the same thing." He stopped. The air shifted between us. "Your wife threw away my letters," I continued. "All of them, including the one document your father trusted me to keep safe." Daniel's face tightened, but not with guilt, more with discomfort. The kind a person feels when they're confronted with a truth they don't want to hold. "She didn't know," he said, but it came out thin. "She knew enough to look for them," I replied. "She knew enough to get rid of them before speaking to me." He ran a hand over his face. "Look, maybe she made a mistake. But even if that letter existed, it doesn't change what needs to happen now." "It changes everything," I said. The silence grew roots. Daniel tapped the envelope against the table twice, then pushed it toward me. "Just sign it," he said softly. "I need you to trust me." I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, not hurt. Something steadier. A line, drawn without tremor. "I do trust you," I said. "But I do not trust the choices you make when you're afraid of disappointing your wife." He flinched. "Daniel," I continued, "you are my son. I love you. But I'm not giving you permission to decide the shape of the rest of my life." His shoulders slumped. For a moment, he looked lost. "Mom, what if you can't handle things later? What am I supposed to do then?" "You'll help me," I said gently. "Not control me." He looked down at the form again, and for the first time, he didn't try to push it closer. After a long minute, he folded it back into the envelope and stood. "I should go," he murmured. "There's something you should know," I said. "Mr. Whitcomb's firm found the archival box. They believe your father's document is inside." Daniel froze. I watched the realization spread across his face. Slow, cold, unavoidable. "Claire isn't going to like that," he said quietly. "No," I replied. She isn't. He nodded once, a defeated little motion, then left without another word. The door closed. I exhaled. A woman can be quiet for 70 years, but when she decides to take back her voice, the whole house hears it. The call came just after breakfast, while the light was still soft enough to make the kitchen look gentler than it felt. I wasn't expecting it. Not today. Not this soon. When the phone rang, my first thought was that it would be Daniel again, worn down by the conversation we'd had, searching for a way back to the version of his mother who never pushed back. But it wasn't Daniel. Mrs. Holloway? The young woman's voice from the law firm. Amelia. Yes, I'm here, I said, though I felt suddenly as though the room had tilted slightly. We found it, she said. Simple words, unadorned. But my breath caught anyway. The document Mr. Whitcomb described, it's intact. A signed copy, dated and witnessed. It confirms sole property ownership to you. I sank into a chair without meaning to, my hand gripping the edge of the table. For a moment, 70 years collapsed into one single sharp truth. John had believed I would need this protection. And he'd been right. Amelia continued. We're preparing a formal packet. It will be ready for pickup tomorrow, or we can send someone to deliver it. I'll come, I whispered. I want to come. After the call ended, I stayed seated for a long moment, letting the weight of relief settle slowly, cautiously, like a bird testing whether a branch can hold it. And when it held, I closed my eyes. John's voice rose in memory. Not the sound of it, but the steadiness. Just in case, Margaret. He always planned for storms even when skies were clear. By afternoon, the house felt different. Not safer. No. Claire's shadow still skimmed the walls, but less like a battlefield I walked barefoot across. I made stew, not out of hunger but habit, something grounding to do with my hands while my mind moved elsewhere. That was when Claire walked in. She didn't bother pretending to be cheerful today. Her heels struck the floor in sharp, controlled taps, and she stopped just inside the kitchen, arms folded, expression stiff. Daniel told me you won't sign the paperwork, she said. I won't, I replied. Her jaw flexed, then tightened into that thin line she thinks makes her look composed. It only makes her look determined to get her way. Margaret, you're being stubborn. This is irrational. You're making decisions based on emotion, not practicality. Emotion, I said softly, is what people fall back on when practicality is being used to disguise pressure. She scoffed. Pressure? We're trying to do what's best for you. No, I replied. You're trying to do what's easiest for you. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but calculation. Daniel is exhausted. You're putting him through so much. This is becoming too complicated for you? I asked. She inhaled sharply, and in that breath, I saw something I'd suspected, but never fully grasped until now. Claire wasn't simply trying to manage me. She was trying to erase any obstacle between herself and whatever future she had imagined, one where my presence was either minimized or removed entirely. You can't hold on to this house forever, she said. It's unrealistic, and frankly, unsafe. At your age, Claire, I interrupted, your concern for my safety is noted and rejected. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. I continued. John arranged legal protections. They are being recovered as we speak. The reaction was immediate, a tiny step backward, so slight most people wouldn't notice. But I did. The faintest widening of her eyes, the tension creeping into her shoulders. She had not expected this. She had expected a woman with no defense. "What kind of protections?" she asked, too casually. "The kind," I said, "that makes selling this house without my consent impossible." Her face hardened. "You're making a mistake." "No," I replied. "I'm correcting one." She turned sharply, walking out without another word. Her perfume lingered in the doorway, sharp, intrusive, like the wake of someone who wants the final word but can't find it. That evening, Daniel called again. His voice sounded quieter, worn thin at the edges. "Mom, Claire said you were threatening legal action." "I said no such thing," I answered. "I simply stated the truth." He sighed. "She's upset." "She's upset because her plans are changing," I said. "Not because she cares about me." He didn't argue. Not because he agreed, but because he could no longer deny how reasonable my voice sounded. Steady, calm, unshaking. "Mom," he whispered. "What happens now?" "Now," I said gently. "We wait for the truth to come home." He didn't know what that meant, but he would. Tomorrow, I would walk into the law office and hold the document that proved what I'd known all along. I was not just the aging woman in the house. I was the owner of it, and no one, especially not the woman trying to tidy me out of her way, would take it from me. I didn't dress up for the meeting. At 70, you stop adorning yourself for validation and start dressing for steadiness. A dark cardigan, comfortable shoes, my hair combed back. I wanted to look like myself. Nothing more, nothing less. The law office was small, tucked between a dentist and a real estate agency, with a brass bell on the door that chimed softly when I entered. A young man greeted me, then guided me to a private room where Amelia waited with a slim folder placed carefully in front of her, like something delicate. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, smiling warmly, "we found everything Mr. Whitcomb remembered." She slid the folder toward me. My hands didn't tremble, but they felt heavy, as if they understood the weight before they even touched the paper. Inside was the duplicate letter. John's handwriting, Harold's signature, a witness line, and clear, unambiguous language stating that the house, our house, belonged solely to me. For a moment, I didn't breathe. It wasn't victory I felt. It was recognition. A quiet acknowledgement from the past that I had not imagined the love and care John left behind, that I had not misplaced protection, that I had not failed him. Amelia explained the next steps: notarized copies, the process of reaffirming ownership with the county, instructions for what to do if anyone attempted to challenge it. Her voice was gentle, reassuring, but I hardly heard the details. I was tracing John's name with the edge of my thumb, the curve of his J, the firmness of his pen. Proof of a promise he made when he still believed our son would always stand with me. When I finally left the office, the wind felt sharper, the sun brighter. I drove home slowly, letting the world move around me while I held the folder close, as though it might slip away if I eased my grip. Claire's car was already in the driveway. Of course it was. She was standing in the living room when I walked in, arms tightly crossed, her voice taut with impatience. "Daniel said you went to some lawyer today. What exactly are you planning?" I set my purse down with deliberate care. "Not planning, confirming." Her jaw tightened. "Margaret, enough with the cryptic answers." I opened the folder and placed the letter on the coffee table between us. "This," I said softly, "is what your decluttering didn't manage to erase." She stared at the document, color rising in her cheeks. Not the flush of embarrassment, but the flush of realization. The kind a person gets when they understand the game they were winning has suddenly changed boards. "What is this supposed to prove?" she asked, but her voice lacked its usual polish. "That the house is mine," I replied. "Legally, entirely, unquestionably mine." She looked up sharply. "Daniel and I were trying to help you." "No," I said, not unkindly. "You were trying to help yourselves." Her lips trembled with a restraint she rarely bothered to use. "So what now?" "You're going to keep living here until you can't walk up the stairs?" "I will live here," I said, "until I choose not to. Not you, not Daniel." I saw something flicker in her eyes then, a realization deeper than anger, a recognition that I was not the obstacle she'd assumed, but the boundary she could not cross. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, "Daniel won't like this." "He'll learn," I replied. Claire turned away sharply, her heels cutting little staccato notes into the floorboards as she moved toward the door. And for the first time in months, no, years, I didn't feel smaller in her presence. I felt exactly my size. A 70-year-old woman standing in the center of her own life, holding proof that she still belonged to herself. The house felt strangely lighter the next morning, not physically, but in the way a place feels when a truth has finally been spoken inside its walls. I walked from room to room with the steadiness of someone reacquainting herself with her own territory. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. It's astonishing how much space dignity takes up once you let it return to the room. After breakfast, I brought the folder to the dining table and laid it out carefully. Not to read it again, I already knew every line by heart, but to decide what would follow. A woman my age doesn't waste steps. Every action must matter. The first thing I did was call the bank. I asked, not timidly, not if someone had the time, but plainly, clearly, to schedule a meeting to update my accounts and remove Daniel's name from anything that gave him access. The woman on the phone didn't question me. People rarely question quiet certainty. Then I called my insurance provider, then my pension office, then the county records department. One by one, I touched every place in my life where influence could sneak in through a crack. And with each call, I felt myself reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd slowly surrendered over the years: my authority. Around noon, Lily arrived again, breathless and bright-eyed, carrying a notebook and that familiar look of fierce loyalty. "Grandma," Dad texted me. He said Claire is furious. "I imagine she is," I said, pouring us both tea. "But anger is not a strategy. It's only a reaction." Lily smiled, the kind of proud, quiet smile that warms a woman more than any compliments about youth ever could. She sat beside me as I opened the folder again, and I saw her eyes shine when she looked at John's handwriting. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," I said. "I make things official." I showed her the list I'd already written. Each place that needed new documentation, each account that required my sole authorization, each step that would remove any legal ambiguity. "Grandma," she whispered, "you've done all this already?" "I've spent too much of my life waiting," I answered. "Waiting for people to remember I deserve respect. Waiting for people to treat me kindly without being asked." I lifted my gaze to hers. "Age has taught me something, Lily. You cannot wait for others to guard your dignity. You must guard it yourself." She reached for my hand, squeezing it with a fierceness that steadied me even more. "I'm proud of you." I exhaled softly. 70 years of quiet doesn't disappear overnight, but it can shift, slowly, then suddenly, into something firmer. In the afternoon, I drove to the county recorder's office. A young clerk notarized the updated documents, scanning everything twice, then 3 times, treating the letter as though it were a relic from another era. In a way, it was. It was proof of care, proof of foresight, proof that someone, once, believed my security mattered. When I left the building, the sky was overcast, but I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe years. Home again, I sat at my kitchen table, John's old chair opposite me, empty but present, and began writing a new will. I didn't overthink it. I didn't hesitate. I simply wrote the truth of my heart. The house would go to Lily, only Lily, not to punish Daniel, but to protect him, from his wife, from his own weakness, from the choices he would someday regret if someone didn't draw the line for him. When I finished, I signed it with a slow, deliberate hand. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was certain. And certainty, I've learned, is the quietest form of power. Daniel came by just after dusk, when the sky had faded into that deep blue that makes the windows look like mirrors. I heard his car door shut softly, not with the irritation of yesterday, but with something closer to hesitation. A man walking into a conversation he knows he can't control. When he stepped inside, he didn't call out for me like he usually does. He found me in the living room, sitting with a blanket over my knees, not because of the cold, but because some evenings require weight you can choose. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I nodded, watching him take a seat across from me. Claire wasn't with him. The absence of her presence felt like the first honest thing he'd offered in months. He cleared his throat. "Claire told me what happened. The letter. The document." "I assumed she would," I said. He didn't meet my eyes. "She's upset." I studied him. The slope of his shoulders, the way his hands twisted together, the traces of the boy he once was flickering through the man trying to find his footing. "Daniel," I said softly, "being upset is not the same as being right." He flinched, just a little. "I know, I didn't realize how important that document was." "Dad never told me." "Your father trusted me to keep it safe," I said. "He didn't think he needed to explain it to anyone else." Silence settled between us, thin but taut. He finally looked up. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. It wasn't accusation. It was something closer to woundedness. "Because," I said gently, "I wanted to believe you didn't need protection from your own wife's ambition. I wanted to believe you would never let anyone make decisions for me without my consent." He opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the uncomfortable realization that comes when a person sees their own reflection more clearly than they want to. I didn't mean to push you," he said. "Claire she thinks about things differently. She's practical." That word again. I sighed. "Do you know what practicality becomes in the wrong hands? A knife, a quiet one." He swallowed hard. "She didn't mean to hurt you." "But she did," I replied. "And you followed her lead." His voice cracked. I'm trying to do the right thing." "I know." And I did. But trying isn't the same as standing up." He looked away again, ashamed. We sat there a long moment, listening to the creak of the settling house. This house he once ran through, laughing. This house he had been willing to sell without looking back. Finally, he whispered, "Are you going to take legal action against us?" The question wasn't afraid. It was defeated. "No," I said. "I'm simply protecting what is mine." He nodded slowly. "And Lily? What about her? She told me you two have been organizing things. There was no accusation in his tone, only curiosity, a little fear, and beneath it, something tender, the desire to still be part of my life. Lily listens, I said. She sees me, that's all. His eyes softened, painfully so. I don't want to lose you, Mom. You won't, I said. But you may lose the version of me who stayed quiet to keep the peace. He exhaled shakily. I suppose I deserve that. No, I said gently. You deserve a chance to be better. He nodded, the smallest movement, but honest. Can we start over? He asked. I felt something warm move through my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the space where forgiveness might someday live. Yes, I said, but this time, on equal ground. He stood, hesitated, then bent and kissed the top of my head like he used to when he grew taller than me. For a brief moment, I closed my eyes. When he left, the house felt full again. Not with tension, but with possibility. Quiet, tentative, fragile, but present. I stayed in the living room long after the door clicked shut, listening to the whisper of my own breath. At 70, the victories you win aren't loud. They're the moments you reclaim the truth of your own worth. The house was quiet in the early morning, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders and stepped out onto the porch, where the boards were cool beneath my slippers and the air smelled faintly of wet earth. The sky was pale, soft, undecided, like a day hesitating before choosing who it needed me to be. I sat slowly, lowering myself into the old wicker chair that had been here since John first sanded these steps. It creaked under me, familiar as breath. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel watched, not evaluated, not managed, just present. The folder sat on my lap, though I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. Proof of my life, my choices, my place. Proof of love that extended beyond death. Proof that silence and patience are not the same as surrender. Birds rustled in the cedar tree. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. I could hear the world waking slowly, but I didn't rush to meet it. A woman who has fought for her dignity doesn't hurry. Lily arrived mid-morning, slipping onto the porch with the ease of someone who belongs there. She sat beside me without speaking, tucking her knees up under her sweater. Dad called, she said after a while. He told me he's giving you space. That's kind of him, I replied. It's more than he wanted to do, she said. But he's trying. Yes, I agreed. Trying matters. It's the only bridge people can still cross after they've lost their way. She looked at the yard, the old maple, the cracked bird bath John once insisted on fixing, but never did. You're keeping it, she said softly. The house. I'm keeping myself, I answered. The house is simply where that begins. She turned to me, eyes warm. I'm glad you didn't let them take it from you. I didn't let them take me, I corrected. The house was never the true battle. She nodded, thoughtful. Then she rested her head lightly against my shoulder, and for a moment we breathed as one. Two women, two generations, both learning in different ways how to hold their ground. Later, after she left, I walked through each room, touching the walls, the corners, the door frames. Not out of sentimentality, but acknowledgement. These rooms had witnessed my quiet years. Now they would witness the steadier ones. By afternoon, sunlight trembled across the living room floor, catching motes of dust that danced like little ghosts, stirred awake by the shift in the air. I opened the windows, letting the breeze move through the house freely, as if it too had been waiting for permission. Daniel hadn't stopped by again. Not yet. But when he does, I know the tone will be different. Not submissive, not apologetic, but aware. Aware that his mother is not someone to be guided out of her own life. As the sun began to lower, I returned to the porch and sat once more. The chair creaked again, the same old song. I rested my hands on the armrests and let the quiet settle around me like a warm shawl. There's a kind of victory that doesn't shout, a kind that doesn't triumph over others but simply restores you to yourself. That's the kind I earned, not through anger, not through revenge, but through refusal, gentle, immovable refusal, to disappear. At 70, I've learned that dignity doesn't vanish unless you hand it away, and I am done handing things away. If you've been reading my story this far, then maybe you know something about quiet endurance too, something about standing your ground even when others would rather you didn't. So if these pages found you, truly found you, leave a comment or share a word or follow along. Not for me. For the women who are still learning, they're allowed to take up space.